If you're outside the UK, Argos was, and technically still is, a catalogue shop that used to be on every high street of every major town or city in the UK. When they released a new catalogue, it was a big event, especially around Christmas, where kids would be marking the pages of their favourite toys they wanted from Santa. I mean, everybody knew that the big fella got his toys from Argos, right? Now, I'm pretty sure I got my Spectrum on the Christmas of 1983, but I've no real recollection of how much my ZX Spectrum was for my parents back then. I always thought it was fairly cheap, but how cheap in today's money? I always knew the C64 was a more premium price, but how premium? Was it really just for the rich kids? And what about the consoles, the Amigas, the Ataris, the IBM compatibles, and of course all that Sega weirdness in between? So in the past week or so, I've been on a really fun nostalgic trip. That means we're counting down the top 30 most expensive home computers and consoles in today's money that appeared in the Argos catalogue between the years of 1980 and 2000. There are a few rules though. The price we go for is the first time the item appeared in the autumn-winter catalogue in its basic form, not with packs of games or bundled with heaps of peripherals, unless of course that's the only way it came. The SNES, or SNES, depending where you come from, is a good example of this, as it was the only one ever packed with a game, but some are more expensive than others. Now we're just looking at the autumn and winter catalogues, we're not bothering with none of this spring-summer bollocks, because the autumn-winter catalogues were the ones that really mattered. Only one IBM compatible PC is in this list, as there were hundreds of different makes and models on sale from the mid-90s, so I went with the cheapest base option that they had, which was really interesting in itself. A little clue, Mr. Sugar went all Sonic with this one. Other than that, if it played games and was considered a console or computer for home use, it's in the list. I used the Bank of England inflation calculator to work out today's prices and was truly amazed at how much some things were. I know it's not an exact science, but it's a bit of fun and it's cool to look back on these fantastic catalogues. So let's get all nostalgic and start with our first Atari in the list. Number 30. An Atari VCS 7800 in 1990? Are you sure? Already 3 years old at this point, 139 quid still seems pretty good value for the 7800. Complete with built-in Asteroids and backwards compatibility with the 2600 library, I don't think that's a bad deal at all, even though it was blown out the water by the more expensive NES. Number 29. The Atari 2600 JT. The flippin' X a JT when it's at home. Interesting entry here, as the model name of JT is a bit of a mystery. It seems there were many different versions of the same smaller 2600 knocking about around this time, as the 2600 was pretty dated by the mid-80s, but would still cost you nearly 150 quid in today's money. Still, you got one terrible looking controller and a free cartridge, and built-in Frogger 2 if this image is to be believed. Number 28. The Atari, oh for goodness sake, it's getting silly now. The Atari CX2600, of course. So a year earlier than the weirdly named JT model, the CX2600 looks identical but costs 69 quid more in today's money. It did come with one more joystick though, and as with the JT, a game. I'm a bit confused with the announcing of 120 variations in gameplay. What does that refer to? Also on this page is the Suncom Slick Stick. Any Atari or Commodore 64 people have one of these? Let me know in the comments if it's any good. It looks slick. At number 27, it's the rather fabulous Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or SNES, or SNES. No, nobody ever actually says that. No real base pack on offer with this one, but only varying games, with Super Mario World Edition being the cheapest and Street Fighter 2 Turbo being the most expensive. I think it's fair to say everyone wanted the Street Fighter 2 pack though. Although a year later the same game pack dropped off considerably in its price at £89 or £179 today, with Mario All-Stars being the premium set of games. I do like the real life 3D effects statement here. By 1995, Street Fighter 2 was cheaper still at £79 or £155 now, but rather cheekily low. If you waited until the following Christmas, the console would set you back £108 or £207 today. The cheeky buggers put Super Mario World and the All-Star games on one cartridge and bumped up the price. And number 26 is the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, or NES, or NIS. No, nobody says that. It's crazy that the NES would cost over £200 now. I always thought it was a cheaper system, and I guess it was compared to the others, but still a chunk of money. It did come with 2 controllers though, and a Mario Brothers game. In 1990, this was the highest price Argos had the console, dropping down to £79.95 a year later in 1991, with the choice of a Turtles or Mario game. By Christmas 1993 though, it had dropped again to a final price of £49.99, which was pretty much £100 today. Pretty good value, but obviously aging by this point. But can anybody shed any light on the plus part of the name in the description here, or is it just a typo? At number 25 we have, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, age of Aquarius." A whole page dedicated to the rather unsuccessful Aquarius home computer from Mattel. One of the most short-lived computers ever. It was pretty much discontinued as it hit the shelves. With only 4K of RAM out of the box, you would need to purchase the 16K expansion pack to play anything remotely decent on it, which were mainly poor ports of Intellivision games. And that would have set you back another £49.99 or £162 in today's money, making this a really poor choice for any poor sod who went for it. Number 24, the Sega Mega Drive. To be this good takes Seb's place. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Interestingly, the description here calls Sonic the Hedgehog an arcade hit game. I never realised there was an arcade game, although calling it so is a bit of a stretch, as the original one was a different isometric affair. It did have more expensive bundles with games, but this was the peak Sonic pack price. Whew. By 1994 it had dropped to £89 with Sonic 2, which is around £179 today. But weirdly, by 1996 the cheapest offering was £100 with a pack of games, and dropping again a year later to £79.50 with 6 games. This was not its lowest price though, as it went down to a measly £49.75 by 1998, which is around £92 in today's money. Number 23. The Nintendo 64, or the N64, or the N64. I'll get one of them right eventually. The only console with 64-bit power. Yes, the Nintendo 64 enters the fray here, with a console and one joypad pack. If you wanted another joypad, it would cost you £27, which would be around £50 nowadays, so controllers since haven't really fallen in price. The games though were crazy expensive. Super Mario 64 would cost you an eye-watering £101 today. Ouch! Also, in the space of a year, the price had dropped by a third to £97, which is £179 today. But 2 games would cost as much as the console, although by Christmas '99 it was £94 with GoldenEye chucked in. Now we're talking. Number 22. The Philips G7000. Damn, this thing is sexy. The Magnavox Odyssey 2, as it was known elsewhere, the Philips G7000 is a charming little thing that cost a pretty penny upon release. A fairly successful offering in the US and Europe, but often overlooked as it lived in the shadows behind the Intellivision and the Atari 2600. A fun little system that stayed in the catalogue until the following year for a reduced price of £69.95. Number 21. The Sega Dreamcast. Just look at it. I mean, just look at it. One of my favourite consoles up next, the fabulous Dreamcast. A victim of its lack of privacy protection and the behemoth known as the PlayStation, this was and still is a wonderful console. Quite pricey though at £364 now, and it's interesting to see that on this page that the controller and the virtual memory pack cost the same amount, which would be £36 today. Number 20. The Commodore 64C. I bought one of these recently and they're bloody good. £375 in today's money seems quite a lot for a system that was very much at the end of its life by 1990, but this was a pretty cool pack. Called the Light Fantastic Pack, it came with the cassette deck, light gun, 3D glasses and 10 games. Although the NES was available at the same time for £65 less, so it might have been a hard sell at this point. £99 a year later with 4 games, and then bumped up again to £119 with the Terminator pack in 1992, and then that was the last we saw of it. Number 19. The Sony PlayStation. Oh yes. Interestingly, 50p cheaper than the Saturn. You did well if you chose it for that reason. This is the most successful console of the 90s, selling over 100 million units over its lifespan. The PlayStation was the console to own. The first thing you did when you got home was show everyone how the cool T-Rex on the demo disc looked. It dropped to £169 with 2 games the following year, or £209 with 4, but it was still good value. By 1999 it was just £99.99, £183 today, with lots of reasonably priced games too, that blew the Nintendo 64 out the water. Number 18. The Sega Saturn. Imagine buying one of these and not the PlayStation for 50p cheaper. Jeepers. One of the victims of the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 successes was most certainly the Sega Saturn. By 1997 it was considerably cheaper than the PlayStation at £149 or £280 today, with a couple of games. In the 1998 catalogue it is nowhere to be seen, even though the Mega Drive is still on sale. Number 17. The Sinclair ZX Spectrum, and also the best computer here, but I might be a little bit biased. Although considered the poor man's 8-bit computer at the time, it would still set you back over £400 in today's money, which is mind-blowing really. A hugely successful little rubber-keyed wonder that only featured in the 84-85 catalogues before Argos seemed to take a break from 8-bit computing altogether in their main catalogues. It dropped to £119 6 months later, before being dropped completely from the Argos range. And number 16, the Atari 2600. I've got a Woody. I've got one of these. The granddaddy of them all was quite a pricey little number back in 1980, especially up against the price of the rather limited Pong-based Binatone and Grandstam systems. I love the description here of the use of the microprocessor circuitry that allows many varied and complex games to be played. The Woody version pretty much held its price until finally dropping to £69 or £224 today at the end of 1983, before being redesigned as a cut down model. Number 15. The Vectrex. If anybody has one they want to get rid of, let me know, I'll be more than happy to take it off your hands for free. I like the Vectrex. I like the Vectrex a lot. And I like the Vectrex even more after seeing the no-nonsense page devoted to it in the 1983 Argos catalogue. What more do you need? Funnily enough, this is one of the few computers that will set you back its comparative price. Is it cheap? No. Does it have its own vector display? Hell yes. At number 14 we have the Amiga 600. Yummy. Just simply a redesign of the Amiga 500 with some optional extras and the cheapest of the Amigas in this list. The pack that Argos sold in 1993 was called the Wild, Weird and Wicked pack. This included Deluxe Paint 2, Silly Putty, Grand Prix and Pushover. Sold at the same time as the 1200, it was really considered old gen at this point, hence the reasonable cost compared to the other Amiga offerings. At number 13, the Commodore VIC-20. They went all out on the design phase of the Commodore 64, didn't they? Bearing in mind what you got for 139 quid back in 1983, this seems like one of the systems here that is definitely overpriced by this point. A very popular entry-level home computer though, and the first to sell 1 million units. You did at least get the cassette recorder and some games. At number 12, Texas Instruments TI-99/4A. Yeah, that rolls off the tongue. Definitely another victim to the big computer crash in the early 80s. Texas Instruments lost enough money to ditch the TI-99 in 1984. Surplus stock was sold off really cheaply, so it would have hurt 6 months down the line to spend £149 on this on Christmas in 1983. At number 11, the Atari 600 XL. I've always been a bit more of a medium man myself. Nearly 500 smackers in today's money for Atari's home computer offering here in 1984, and only 16k in the base model, expandable to 64. And the joystick game pack, which can be seen at the bottom of this page, had to be purchased separately. Bargain. Number 10. The Commodore 64. What a machine. We're into the top 10 with proof only the rich kids owned Commodore 64s that comes in at a whopping £620 in today's money. But what did you get? Well, nothing really, just the bread bin. Even the introduction to basic book was 15 quid, which is 46 notes today. Bloody rich kids. Number 9. The Atari 520 STE. Considerably cheaper than the Amiga 500 at the same time, the Atari STE, E for enhanced over the earlier ST, seemed fairly good value for the punch it packed. This one came with the Discovery Extra Pack that came with 4 games: Final Fight, SimCity, Robot Monsters and 9 Lives. Also a bunch of utilities including Neochrome Paint. Ooh, fancy. By the following Christmas it had disappeared from the pages of the Book of Dreams altogether, as it seems the Amigas had their foot firmly wedged in the door. At number 8, it's the Sega Multi-Mega Completely Bonkers Are You Insane? What the hell are you doing? CD thing. Wow, these things were actually sold by Argos. I would love to know who bought one. If you don't know what it is, it's essentially the Mega Drive 2 and Mega CD combined into a portable unit. Yes, I said portable. You could use this as a portable CD player on batteries apparently. If you weren't bothered by portability though, you could just use a Mega Drive 2 for 89 quid and a Mega CD for £195, totalling 284 quid, saving yourself 55 quid if my maths is to be believed, which would be £110 in today's money. Not to be sniffed at. Oh, and you get the same game. Plus Sonic. Result. Sega were bonkers. Number 7. Intellivision. So many buttons for 700 quid. With its bizarre 12-button remote control styled pad to its gold slender looks, it's undeniable that the Intellivision looks the part. A big seller which had mostly generic titles in its library due to its limitations, games would often come with card overlays that went over the 12 keys to help you know which buttons to press. By 1982, Argos had them for the reduced price of £139 and a further reduction to £99 by 1983, which was only 30 quid more than the 2600, although that's still £100 in today's money. Number 6. The Amiga 1200. Yes, another Amiga. The true successor to the Amiga 500, the 1200 was the last word in these home computers that filled the gap between consoles and PCs. Interestingly, this one has 1 meg of RAM being advertised here. Is that right? I thought the 1200s had 2 meg stock, but maybe some early models didn't. If anybody knows what's going on here, please enlighten me in the comments. It also advertises the new AGA chipset in the description to give a smoother scrolling experience, and it still had enough to offer for the short time before the PC market fully took over by the late 90s. It didn't feature at all in the subsequent autumn-winter catalogues as IBM compatible started to rule the roost. Number 5. The Amiga 500 Plus. Yes, it's another Amiga. So a year before the 1200, here we have the more expensive Amiga 500 Plus. But what a difference a year makes, eh? But it's a pretty cool pack nonetheless. The Cartoon Classics pack came with Captain Planet, The Simpsons, Lemmings and Deluxe Paint 3. If $399 seems like a lot of money, it's worth seeing that the Smith Coroni word processor offering next to it here is a whopping £349, and I know which one I'd rather have. Plus, it came with 1 meg of RAM too. And number 4, the Atari 1040 STE. Yes, it's another Amiga. Actually, no, it's not. Neck and neck with the Amiga 500 Plus was the Atari 1040 STE with the less exciting sounding Family Curriculum Pack. Now this was sold alongside the other enhanced offering, the 520 STE, but for £100 more. For that extra money you got 1 meg of RAM and a more business school orientated selling point. The extra memory is the only difference between the two as far as I can see though. So is this doubling up of RAM really worth £210 in today's money? And number 3, the Philips CDI 470. And how many people in the comments are going to tell me that's not a games console? Kind of is. Here we have the much sleeker version of the CDI 400 series model with the 470. With the video cartridge installed, this is the only model that could make this list as an albeit controversial games console. The 450 did feature in the Argos catalogue, but without the video cartridge it was just a glorified CD player. Here at least you could play games, with MadDog McCree and Star Trek 6 both included. A jack of all trades, but really a master of none. And number 2, it's the Acorn A3010. At least you get some nice green keys for the money. The A3010 was part of Acorn's Archimedes range, and it's a tricky one in this list as the range was very much aimed at students and schools. This model though came after the 3000, which was the last to use the BBC micro branding that was very much at the heart of the school project. So the 3010 was much more a home market machine, trying to compete with the Amiga and Atari ST machines using the familiar all-in-one housing that was popular with these computers. The 3010 even came included with Quest for Gold, some Olympic sports game. But bearing in mind this was over £100 more than the Amiga 1200 on the same page, you can see why it wasn't as popular. Still, it does apparently have the best version of Elite over all other systems, so that's something. At number 1, the Amstrad MegaPC. It's not a MegaPC, but it's got a Mega Drive. So yes, of course, an IBM compatible PC was always going to be number 1. But which one? Well, they did push a lot of their PCs in separate leaflets and not in the main Argos catalogues. So the cheapest I could find in this era was this Lord Sugar masterpiece from 1993 that, yes, had a built-in Mega Drive inside. But by 1993 the 386SX was considered old hat, with the market very much set up in the 486 camp. So although this did come with a Mega Drive, you also paid quite a bit more money for much older PC hardware. Still, it did come with a 40 meg hard drive, MS-DOS 5 installed, and an unknown graphical user interface, Windows 3, 3.1 perhaps? A joystick and a rather cool Amstrad branded Mega Drive joypad were also included, along with some Mega Drive games, Sonic 2, European Club Soccer, Toe Jam and Earl, and Shadow of the Beast. The Mega Drive was just a card installed inside, but it was quite nifty how you flicked between the two. RMC did a tremendous 4-part series on it, which I'll link in the description. I do have a soft spot for this though, as it really epitomises the Amstrad ethos at the time. I love it. Now I'll leave you with this awesome ad where Dad literally gets blown away at the end. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Isn't it typical? You get stuck into your favourite Sega games on your Amstrad MegaPC, speakers blasting out in Sega stereo and...
Sorry son, I need to use the PC. I've got work to do.
So he uses a 386SX computer running at 25 megahertz for word processing, database, spreadsheets. What a waste of 40 megabytes of hard drive. The new Amstrad MegaPC, just £999.99. Brilliant for business, mega for games.